Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, depending on where you are. My name is Ayşe Çağlar, and I'm a professor at the Department of Social and Cultural Anthropology at the University of Vienna and a permanent fellow at the IWM Institute for Human Sciences, also based in Vienna. Our team is composed of Clemens Schmidt, who provides us technical assistance, and Anna Chukovic, PhD student in anthropology. So I just want to underline that this seminar series could have never taken place, we would not be able to realize it without their valuable support. We want to welcome you to this month's seminar series on forced migration, as we welcome Professor Ishita Dey from South Asian University, India, who will be giving a talk titled Researching Journeys, quote unquote journeys, challenging and possibilities in migration studies. Let me give you some information about the seminar series, our monthly seminar series on forced migration, for those of you who are joining our seminars for the first time. The seminar series is part of the Europe-Asia Research Platform on Forced Migration, which is anchored at the Institute für die Wissenschaften für Menschen, IWM, as I mentioned, and Mahanirban Calcutta Research Group, CRG, in Calcutta. The seminars are, although they are anchored in these institutions, the seminar series is hosted at the Department of Social and Cultural Anthropology at the University of Vienna. Europe-Asia Research Platform on Forced Migration aims to advance the cooperation between European and South Asian institutions and academics, while working towards creating a joint research platform for innovative knowledge production on forced migration and bordering regimes. Unfortunately, these issues became every day more and more important with the state of the world. We aim to bring to scholars, policymakers, and practitioners from different disciplines and regions. And so the seminar series aspires to decentering the scholarship, debates, and policies on forced migration. I think this decentering, this kind of decentering is needed from very different perspectives. I would like to share some housekeeping rules before I introduce our speaker. Please note that this seminar is recorded and will later on be uploaded to the IWM YouTube channel, so that you could suggest to other people to watch and listen it, and we know that they are being watched and listened. And we kindly ask you not to record the seminar yourselves. So it will be recorded, it will be available. And please keep your microphone and camera turned off. And if you have questions, please feel free to post them on the chat throughout the presentation. We will have a Q&A session after the talk, and we will pose your questions to our guest Professor Ishita Dey. It might not be in the same order that the questions would be asked. Sometimes we try to connect the similar kind of questions or related questions together. Now I would like to introduce our speaker. Dr. Ishita Dey is an assistant professor at the Department of Sociology, Faculty of Social Sciences, South Asian University, as I mentioned, in Delhi. Her research interests are migration, labor, food, and senses. She has been working on the life of sweets and sweetness in South Asia. She has co-anchored an art research project on smells of the city with a focus on Delhi, supported by Kiran Nadar Museum of Art, Delhi. And she's an editorial board member of the journal Society and Culture in South Asia. Among many of her publications, Dey has co-authored, co-edited a book. She also co-authored, but I would like to first mention the co-edited book, Sustainability of Rights After Globalization, which came from Sage 2011, and co-authored a book, Beyond Calcutta, Rajarhood and the Dystopia of Urban Imagination, together with Rana Bir Samadar and Suhita Sen, which came from Routledge in 2013. And she has published her work in several journals such as the Sense and Society, Gastronomica, Refugee Watch, and South Atlantic Quarterly, among others. She also co-hosts a podcast, Travel Matters. And I think there are some kinds of connections with today's talk and the topic of the series of podcasts that she is co-hosting on Travel Matters. So we are very happy and honored that you accepted our invitation, Ishita Dey, and the floor is yours. We are looking forward to your talk. You could start, Ishita.
Yes. I take this opportunity to really thank Professor Ayşe Çağlar for extending this invitation, along with Anna and Clemens, to present my work as part of the ongoing seminar series on forced migration as part of the platform that Professor Ayşe already mentioned. My heartfelt thanks also to IWM Vienna, Mahanirban Calcutta Research Group, and the Department of Social and Cultural Anthropology at the University of Vienna. As I begin this new journey on journeys, I must reiterate the role of Mahanirban Calcutta Research Group, and especially Professor Rana Bir Samadar, for introducing me to the world of forced migration studies. And in 2007, this is way before my doctoral studies, for entrusting me to work on a series of dialogues on internally displaced persons in India at the height of what I would call that particular period, development-induced displacement. And then I was working, so the project responsibility to protect, there was a particular report that we published, responsibility to protect under that particular program, which also informs my interest in India's internal migrant workers. Looking back at the dialogues with the civil society actors that we conducted in 3 cities, Bangalore, Bhubaneswar, and Calcutta, and my own research segment on a later project, Transit Labor, I realized that across these deliberations, the civil society actors who were actively working with the internally displaced persons and migrant workers, they were constantly cautioning us not to approach migration as an event by introducing new typologies, such as development-induced displacement or climate-induced displacement, because these typologies also had linkages to each other, and constantly the civil society actors were deliberating on the way in which these typologies are coming about. And what they were emphasizing was, as I look back at these deliberations that happened in 2007, they were constantly urging us to think of it as a process. If we turn through the pages of the report, Responsibility to Protect, a report which is available on the CRG's website, we will find in a particular deliberation a former civil servant from the government of Orissa taking pride in the fact that they had come up with the best relief and resettlement policy in 2006. Let me also tell you how this policy was formulated. This policy was only formulated after 13 people from tribal backgrounds were killed in Kalinganagar in police firing during attempts at land acquisition for a proposed Tata factory in the area. He claimed that policies like these could prevent violent incidents, and the debates on resettlement and rehabilitation programs in India have continued to point to the cultural loss of identity, struggles to find the sources of livelihood. Say, for instance, there are quite a number of studies around the displaces of one of the temples of resurgent India, the Bhakranangal Dam, where the displaces of the Bhakranangal Dam actually got resettled in semi-arid areas and unarable land. Partition refugees, and this was the same sort of fate that met the partition refugees as well from the then East Bengal, who were first housed in a bordering camp around the Indo-Bangladesh border, the Kupas camp in Noida district. And then some of them were sent to the central part of India. Then it used to be called part of the Madhya Pradesh, but later, many years later, when I was visiting Chhattisgarh as a part of a completely different project, I find a Bengali community settled in the heart of Chhattisgarh and who were talking about how they really tried to work and till the land. While most of this, places, and this is where I will introduce, my first sort of tension that I'm trying to deal with. While most of these places appeared in the scholarship on migration studies, either as source states or destination states or places where people have settled down, and there is a bit of scholarship that is available on how migrants have contributed to placemaking in studies which have used placemaking as a sort of a framework, till the idea of movement within placemaking remains absent from these studies. And this is primarily because there is a sort of three moments that kind of cuts across these journeys. One, as I tell in my abstract, the moment of arrival. Second, something that gets documented and worked upon is the moment of survival and resilience. And the third, the third is when people are looking at a second sort of a journey that can begin is another sort of a another journey of displacement in some cases, particularly in cases of partition refugees where they have been doubly displaced, or in cases of other displaces of development-induced displacement. So in 2007, when I conducted fieldwork in Cooper's Camp, and when I went to Chhattisgarh many years later in 2016 or 17, where I found business owners actually remembering that some of their parents actually had stayed in this particular Cooper's Camp in Noida district. I went back to my field notes, and this is where I started questioning myself as to why I did not pay attention to journeys and why these were just places on the maps. So in 2007, when I conducted fieldwork in Cooper's Camp in Noida district, one thing that was visible yet remained invisible in the studies that many of us have written on Cooper's Camp are the railway tracks that brought in refugees. The railway tracks are clearly visible, but they clearly remain visible from this administrative block that houses the resettlement department, post office, and that this railway tracks were a clear reminder, were a very, very clear reminder of the logistical significance of trains in the journeys of partition refugees. As I returned to my field notes of Cooper's Camp after that visit to Chhattisgarh, I found a diary entry that I had never addressed in my existing study on Cooper's Camp. Ask around how many trains entered Cooper's Camp. Scholarship on partition has time and again shown that journeys are very, very crucial to understand how partition was a caste class divided process. Here, I'm reminded of Ravinder Kaur's very, very powerful essay, The Last Journey, exploring the social class in partition, where she writes, and I quote her, "The duration of the journey and the means of transport used to undertake the journey are crucial indicators of class differences that significantly alter the experience of displacement. The clusters of differing migration experiences can be built around what she writes, A, the foot columns, those who walked hundreds of miles over several days or weeks. Second, the railway journey, a shorter journey, but undertaken in highly cramped and difficult conditions. Third, military trucks that were used for shorter distance travel, but not available easily. And finally, air travel that was swift, safe, but available to only those who could pay that exorbitant price. The level of danger also increased dramatically as the mode and the duration of the journey became shorter," unquote. She further observes in this particular essay that for the partition refugees on the western side of the border, that is the Punjab side of the border, foot columns were the preferred means of evacuation for the rural masses compared to the railways, which were deployed to ferry the urban populace. Ravinder Kaur writes that as per the joint evacuation movement plan between India and Pakistan, there was an expectation that at least 5 to 6 trains would operate between East and West Punjab. These trains, incidentally, were known as India or Pakistan specials, depending on the destination. Many of us may be familiar with the very, very famous novel by Khushwant Singh on what these trains turned out to be. And as I point in my abstract, and here I would like to draw attention to Marianne Aguar's work. Marianne Aguar clearly points out in her work on partition that in the wake of partition, the trains which had by then become an expression as a symbol of colonial modernity, civilizing mission, had turned into death trains. Similarly, on the eastern side of the border, what was happening? Anusha Boshirai-Chaudhury and Shekhar Bandyopadhyay, in their work on Dalit migration, points to the breakdown of Dalit Muslim alliance in East Pakistan when 22 villages inhabited by the Hindu Namashudras gets attacked, and as part of a search operation for a few communists, Calcutta Press covers this news, according to Boshirai-Chaudhury and Bandyopadhyay, as an attack on Hindus, erasing communists, and as an attack on Hindus, erasing the communists and Namashudra bit. And this was followed by riots in several places. And Dalit peasants gets targeted. And by first week of January 1950, there are records, and they write that the first batch of 500 Dalit refugees arrive in Bongaon railway station, clearly indicating they had arrived by some train, right? But yet, trains trains constantly appear as a motive in these writings in the moments of arrival, but but we do not find we do not find any representation of these trains in the life of the migrants. How do they view the train as a space? Looking back at trains, there is some work that is available in the Partition Museum. There is some work that is available in the Partition Museum around on this particular thematic. But what we clearly see here is that trains appear to be one of the visual expressions that is used across populist representations of partition. I think anyone who is familiar with partition literature will be familiar with photographs, and purposefully I did not pick up those photographs because they are quite widely used in circulation of visual representation of partition. And Partition Museum
Ishita,
has...
I don't want to interrupt, but the slides are not moving. Do you want to move them?
No, I will move them later on.
Okay.
Yeah, I
okay.
think,
Sorry.
yeah, I'll just move them later on. Yeah, when I come to the discussion of the other trains. So very purposefully, I did not put up those photographs once again because these are widely available, and Partition Museum has an excellent collection of the photographs where we see this quote unquote India special, Pakistan special trains, packed with refugees, and they are trying to make their way about. Often they are referred to as the death trains. So clearly, trains have played a very, very important role in the post-colonial infrastructure of the Indian subcontinent and also cross-border travel. And if I could just plug in here, we are going to soon have a podcast episode on the trains, that used to connect in the cross-border travel, particularly the two trains, that do not run anymore are Samjhauta Express and Thar Express that connected India and Pakistan after independence. Let's put it this way. Interestingly, on the eastern side of border between India and Bangladesh, there are three trains that do continue to operate, which is Maitri Express, Bandhan Express, and Mitali Express. According to the portal of Indian Railways, Indian Railways apparently is the largest rail network in Asia and world's second largest. Despite the significance of railways in the history of mobility, it remains under-examined in migration studies beyond quantitative assessments of the number of passengers in trains, especially during pandemic, or its critical role in what I call the arrival narratives, as I cited before, to destination. And this is why I am interested in studying, trains. How do migrants associate with trains and train journeys? How do India's internal migrant workers, specially view railway compartments and the introduction of digitized facilities within the Indian railway transportation network? These questions are particularly significant as trains, especially Shramik literally means labor, trains were introduced on the Labor Day on 1st May 2020, and we all know what had happened around March 2020. India went under heavy lockdown, where the train services also remained suspended, and that's why the entire world woke up to the horrifying images of migrant workers walking down, on the national highways. So these trains were introduced on 1st May 2020 to take migrants home. How did the migrant workers view these trains? Just to give you a sense of what are these Shramik trains, According to the Indian Railways website, they announced that these trains would transport workers, tourists, pilgrims, students who were stranded back to their home states. Indian Railways already had operated, a total of, these are some of the records that are being suggested in the news media. Apparently 4,615 special trains actually had been used during this time. Railway tracks, and this is where, let's put it this way, again, going back, you will see these images, are very, very important. Many of the migrant workers had not only used, highways or to walk down, but they were also walking down, the railway tracks, right? And this is where there were, reports that around, the newspaper reports suggest that around 8,700 people actually have died on tracks in 2020. Many of them were migrants. And these are the railway board officials who are being quoted. And this particular statement is extremely important, where officials themselves are accepting that many of the migrant workers actually chose to walk home on the railway tracks because train routes are considered shorter, which also tells us why it is important to go back to studying journeys and how migrant workers look at, to understand how migrant workers view speed and technology as integral to the making of their journeys. These details also kind of tell us that, that if 4,000, just I'll take you back to this slide. If there are 4,615 Shramik special trains that had connected, or connected migrant workers, students, pilgrims, all of them, all the stranded workers in the cities. So which are the places where they were taking people to and from? What were the homes and what were their perceived places of work? There is a brilliant map that Simrit Singh actually, in one of the maps he presents in one of the news portals. He actually talks about, Simrit Singh talks about, that Mumbai's migrant workers had traveled on 426 trains to 18 states across India. And many of them had left for Uttar Pradesh, and almost 1/5 of the trains, had Bihar as their destination. This takes us back to, why there is a need to study trains. During the pandemic, and why there's a need to study how did migrant workers view these trains. During the pandemic, I was helping a domestic workers collective to organize rations. One of my respondents from earlier field work, with whom I had worked before, had heard about this initiative and contacted me. When I asked her if she was planning to take Shramik trains, she responded, "Why do they need to call us that? We know we are unwanted. Now they want us to go homes. What will we feed?" Maya, name changed here, a part-time domestic worker in a middle-class neighborhood in Delhi, observed, "Many people are leaving. If it comes to that, I'll book myself and my children a spot in a car," implying another mode of transport that people took to return homes during the pandemic was private vehicles, which were of course overcharging, and they were charging per seat. And this is what Maya is implying here. Maya also tells me that she wanted to book herself and her children a spot in one of those private cars because when she tells me, when I told her about the Shramik trains, she tells me her children won't be able to endure the journey. They are used to a certain life. She disclosed that was the reward after schools had closed. They would wait to enjoy an 18-hour journey in an air-conditioned compartment where food would arrive in regular intervals. Maya did not want to disclose this, and I sensed her hesitation the moment she said, "Change my name when you write this." I had earlier interviewed her, and she has always been very vocal about using her name in the research project. But this time she wanted me to change her name. But I want you to write. But she was also emphasized that, but I want you to write so that they know, and I quote her, they know we have dreams. I never quite figured how to read into the stories of arrival and fear of returning home. Fear of returning home as I was collecting, as I was both, helping out an organization to collect data, as well as, I was conducting interviews during the pandemic with migrant workers, particularly the domestic workers. These stories of arrival and fear of returning homes also made me think that there was a need to study the circular nature of migration and a need to find a site that was beyond the place of origin, destination, place of work, and home. There is an existing scholarship, particularly which looks at or which tells us the significance of studying at the source as well as the destination. But here I would like to make a case for what was happening in between, and a question to myself: how do I study in between? Train for me becomes that site and becomes that important site to study this in between. I would not be quick to be drawn into Maya's narrative of dreams, but her statement does point to a need to study how do people associate mobility with speed and technology. While the technocratic state is reimagining India's infrastructure, and where railway networks are, where railway is being envisioned with this bullet express trains, Vistadome coaches, digital food delivery services, where do migrant workers feature in this technocratic imagination of the state? That is one question. Second, how do migrant workers are coping with the changing rubrics of technology? To do so, and this is where I return. This is where why the particular diagram, the particular map. I want to take you through that map of Simpreet Singh. I don't know if the map is visible, but if you clearly see, Bihar is somewhere on the eastern side of India. If you clearly see the number of passengers who were headed from Bombay to Uttar Pradesh, and when in this particular map, it's showing that these are the number of trains that were heading to Bihar. This also becomes my entry point, why I want to study the railway networks from Bihar. To do so, I plan to return to Bihar, one of the lead quote-unquote source states according to the UNESCO Internal Migration Data Resource, and plan to embark on a 35-hour, officially it's a 35-hour journey, because the trains can run, and trains on certain routes particularly run very, very late, and it can go up to 40 hours. To do so, I propose to return to Bihar, one of the lead source states, and plan to embark a 35-hour train journey from Bhagalpur to Lokmanya Tilak station in Mumbai, Maharashtra, one of the quote-unquote lead destination stations. The train journey from Bhagalpur to Mumbai will cover 3 states, Bihar, Uttar Pradesh, and Madhya Pradesh, before reaching Maharashtra. Scholars working on migration in Bihar, especially Pushpendra Kumar and Manish Jha, in their essay, From Kosi to Delhi, Life and Labor of Migrants, have pointed out that trains originating from or passing through the Kosi region, bound to Delhi, Jammu, Punjab, Gujarat, Maharashtra, are common now. Better transport links have enhanced migration volume and provided much needed elasticity of labor supply to far-flung places. But how do we historicize the introduction of train networks, infrastructure in Bihar, in the context of its perceived imagination as a lead source state? As of now, I begin with the recognition, and this will be my sort of cutoff here. I'm going to take, and I invite audience, the comments from the audience that about this. I really want to take a sort of a cutoff year around 2005, when the Minister of Railways actually was from Bihar, and I'm talking about Lalu Prasad Yadav. This is probably, after a long time, what we see in the imagination of a railways. There was a recognition of the poor in the building of the infrastructure. There was a particular train that got introduced, literally meaning chariot of the poor or Garib Rath. And the first Garib Rath actually connected one of the places in Bihar which witnesses a lot of outmigration to a place in Punjab, in Amritsar. So Saharsa in Bihar to Amritsar, this is the first Garib Rath Express, and it is always referred to in the media as a poor man's air-conditioned railway coach. This is why I am returning to Bihar, and what do I intend to study in this particular journey? Do I have some time to go into this, Professor Ayşe?
Yes, but not very much.
Yes.
Okay, definitely you have some time.
Yeah. Okay. So what do I intend to study in this journey, and what are the challenges therefore? One of the things that I want to bring back to the study of the train journeys, if I this particular train route that I'll be undertaking, and where I want to undertake the site of study is in what the Indian Railways call quote unquote sleeper class compartments. Mostly each coach sort of has 72 official berths. This could be the official number, 72 to 74 official number of berths. 74 people can be officially accommodated, but the number of people, of course, are much more higher, because even if the seats can accommodate 3 people, it can go up to 4 to 5. And many people who might not have a sleeper berth, they actually end up sleeping in between the spaces that are there in the passages around the coupe. And each coupe has a sort of 3 berths on the left, 3 berths on the right, and a double tire berth on the passageway. So 8 berths kind of make a sort of a small sleeping arrangement. And because and each of these coaches also have a laboratory, have facilities of washrooms, right? Washrooms and basins attached to the train. And this takes us back to, because it is a sort of a cramped space, of course, this is what, the teaching or my learning from bringing back senses to the labor, which I want to bring it back to this project, that in this particular journey, I really want to respond to Maya's, question or comment that we have dreams, back to, how do they view train as a sensorial sort of a space. I call this a sensorial space also to enter the politics of mixing of caste, gender, religion, because this is not a segregated space, right? And this has been repeatedly pointed out in the literature on trains, particularly to do in partition, that many a times during the partition, this became a place of mixing, right? So what is the sensorial politics of railway compartments? And is there a sort of a sensorial hierarchy, right? And the sensorial hierarchy particularly becomes important because architects have done quite fascinating work around railway compartments, where they show how workers, both workers, passengers, how they use the compartment space extremely innovatively, both to live, chat, play games, eat food, but also to dry dry towels, take care of children, and other sorts of things. So how do we sort of see the railway compartment as a living, breathing space, and the challenges that the workers kind of face, as as I said, that many of the people also, that the sensorial politics particularly will be important to unpack. What are they eating in this 35-hour journey, right? What are they eating in this 35-hour journey? What sort of social stratification or socially stratifying sense of home they are embodying, they are living in this journey, and what they are resisting, they are giving up, they are negotiating. This gets the sensorial politics of the railway compartments is something I want to map closely through a smell mapping exercise that I want to undertake with them, through a sort of a memory smell mapping. That what kind of smells did they encounter, before, and what the kind of smells they can encounter now, particularly if they are migrating for the first time, or if they are not they are not migrating for the first time. The second aspect that I want to really interrogate and introspect is the idea of technology of mobility. Scholarship on literature cannot, scholarship on trains cannot be disentangled from the existing scholarship of logistics and infrastructure, which is primarily around ideas of speed, mobility, and also aspiration. And here, how do they view this particular train in comparison to other trains is something that I really want to engage in. And this is my way of taking the question that Maya had said, that I do not want to go in Shramik trains because I'm used to traveling in superfast trains with a certain kind of a comfort. This is what I want to address. What ideas how do they look at technologies of mobility? What do they, figure out in terms of making technology also accessible for themselves, right? Particularly women who might be, women migrant workers who might be either traveling with families or who might be traveling. I do not want to assume that they are not traveling independent of themselves, but if there are female migrant workers who are traveling by themselves, it would be also important to understand what to train as a sort of technology of mobility. Is it also gendered, and the ways in which particularly in some of the trains, because many of the migrant workers and some of the recent studies on media and migrant workers are also showing how migrant workers have found an expression in TikTok, in this, and they have talked a lot about journeys in this TikTok videos, etc. So I want to go back to those, like how do they represent the train? Third and most important that I want to bring back, and this is what I had opened my presentation with, is the idea of placemaking in the choice of destination. I do not want to look at placemaking as a sort of a static thing. How do movement figure in their ideas of placemaking in migrant journeys? And with these three tentative propositions, a sensorial politics of railway compartments, technologies of mobility, which will of course have a gendered and caste component here, I'm hoping, and choice of destinations. I really, really hope that this reading of journeys might allow us to understand borders within borders, and it is not a metaphorical a phrase that I have chosen. It is also to kind of it is primarily to reflect on the social markers of social stratification that we encounter when we are migrating. That might allow us to understand borders within borders and its impact on India's migrant workers. Journeys, I feel, will allow us to strengthen the need to understand rural and urban, not only as a continuum, but to understand that in-between space. And I hope that this reading of journeys will provide a new avenue to contribute to the scholarship on circular migration, and also provide us with new possibilities to revisit the state infrastructures that shape lives in transit, also mobility. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Ishita, for this very interesting and very inspiring talk. Definitely, of course, it addresses several biases, assumptions within migration scholarship, but also brings the trains as a very interesting space, which one could look at it in terms of stratification, but also in a way placemaking in a broader sense of the term. What I see also is very interesting from your talk is that before opening it to the discussion, I would like to underline that this kind of the linearity assumptions in migration scholarship, and that is why this is the source state, source country, arrival, country of origin, country of arrival, receiving state, sending state, receiving state, or even in terms of one tries to move beyond the terminologies and lengths of the nation state, still arrival cities, which was actually trying to break that, but in still remaining within the kind of the linearity. And I think that the very strong sedentary logic constrains the imaginaries of the migration scholarship, even the ones who try to break it. And I think that the importance of the arrival, the emphasis put on the arrival kind of the narratives, and I think they all come with this kind of the linearity. And the circular migration actually does not break it too, because it is not multi-directional. It is always in terms of moving in that kind of line. And I think that the transnational migration scholarship, which started, was although it was very much constrained in the beginning with this kind of the binaries, but there were some other kinds of interventions there. And so I think this is a very important reminder to the migration scholarship, how those linearities constrained our imaginaries of scholarship and also policies in the ways that, although we thought that we are breaking with that linearities. And I would like to underline that the importance that you're bringing in terms of trains and displacement, of course, in the imaginaries in Europe, that deportations were displacements, forced displacements, deportations, and the iconography of trains, that you cannot think of the Holocaust without the trains. So deportations were very much with the trains. They came very much up front. And also it is interesting when people compare that now, for example, to 2015, quote unquote refugee crisis, where the arrivals were either on foot, but also train stations. And now with the current situation with the Ukraine war and then the refugees, actually it is much more decentered, because also the traveling by car. And it creates very different spaces of interaction, I think, in terms of the questions about the logistics of arrival also for the forced migrants. And what I find it also interesting in terms of the trains, that how you could tackle the migration journeys, but also transformative aspects of those journeys for everyone involved in it, in relation to the trains having a kind of a semi-public sphere. It is not a completely private sphere, and it is not completely a public sphere too, because of its stratification. And it is in a way a kind of a structured but still space of mixing and interaction. And I was wondering whether this kind of interaction, because of this kind of a semi-public sphere, does the train journey, or do the train journeys initiate different kinds of relationships in terms of interacting with each other? I recall a very interesting Iranian film, I think it was called 10, that in a kind of a sphere, and kind of a semi-public sphere, how people come to tell their stories differently than it were in a public space. So I would like to ask you about whether you see this kind of this space being transformative in terms of the relationships with the people, that not only in terms of the dreams, but the actual ones. And I think that the placemaking was always, because of this sedentary logic, it has to be either at the arrival one, or it was before that where you are uprooted. But in a way, I would like to read your placemaking entry point, in a way, placemaking within the social stratification, so that it is not only in one sense, but a way of negotiating of your social place, location, in it. So whether you could elaborate a little bit on that if you would like to. Thank you very much. And then please feel free to write your questions on the chat. Would you like to comment on this kind of, whether it has a kind of opens a different form of communication and way of relating to the others, and how does it fit in terms of the social placemaking?
Yes, absolutely, absolutely. Thank you. I mean, I was finding, I think I thought that, you put it really, really beautifully about, how this work kind of challenges that linearity, right? And I really think that, that this, you're absolutely right. The way in which the trains are train compartments are part private, part public, it also raises, questions about intimacy and stratification, right? And I think there is a potential about, looking at intimate spaces. And in a sense, this is where I say I take inspiration from what Maya cautioned me, that not to look at so much in terms of dreams, but also to look at the living condition, the life as it is lived, that I think I want to capture that rather than, and I think also the social placemaking in social stratification, this will play a sort of an important role, particularly, I think, to challenge those linearities in terms of source and destination, and also to challenge that, these are the places from where this sets of migrants come out to do only this sort of work, right? Because our certain things also get decided in the journeys per se. I mean, they are opening up to these conversations, interesting. One of the anecdotes that, let's put it this way, when I was sharing this particular project with a friend who has been traveling in the sleeper class compartments, he told me something very interesting to map, which is about how using the free Wi-Fi, this is on another train route, many of the younger migrants, particularly from 21 to 25, they also use this opportunity to call up their lovers, and I thought, back home, particularly during the train journeys, right? So I think these are so there are also this moment of spaces of freedom, but what kind of freedom are they negotiated upon, right? Also, I think these spaces there is a sort of freedom also comes with this thing of transgression, right? So trains are those spaces, where, let's put it this way, what sort of, policing behavior they are subjected to, right? Because the Railway Protection Force, if they do not have a ticket to travel with, if they do not, I mean, what sort of, documents do they need to carry apart from the tickets and the identity documents? Let's put it this way. So I think, and this is where I was really, really thinking that, maybe after the train journeys, it would be very important to kind of have a sense of sort of, a sort of an, archive on the documents that they, carry about, to make these journeys also easy. What kind of, because there is a particular artist who was working on a project about what kind of books, particularly younger migrant workers, if they know to read, what kind of, books they're buying from the railway stations, or do they buy the newspapers? These are the little things that can also give us a sense of what ideas, or what informs their idea of placemaking of the journey during the course of the journey. Yes.
Okay.
There is a...
And we have some questions, but before that I was wondering whether you look at it that in terms of the train routes are also loaded from where to where, and then the people make a very big differentiation in terms of, so it is not the social stratification within the trains, but between the roads also, between the routes. I think it would be. And I have one curiosity question, because what about the buses in terms of the migrants using the buses? It might be something special because of India, because you said that the train trips are thought to be shorter. I have Turkey in mind because train trips are never shorter, because railroads were paid when they were established. They were paid by kilometer to the people, so they are. It's definitely the longest way, not the shortest, and the people use buses. Why the buses do not figure? Because buses create that kind of a. And long bus trips are also well known, and the buses create also a very interesting space, very difficult to create different stratifications. Why buses were never an issue?
In fact, there are scholars. In fact, I was just, looking if Professor Manish Jha also alerted me to the role of buses, where contractors, and this is what, where contractors are actually, hiring migrant workers with the transportation facilities. So there are these pockets, and this is not only, I mean, he had spoken about particularly in terms of Bihar, but also say in Kerala, in the southern states, there are these bus networks with migrant workers, vis-a-vis the migrant workers. I have also become a preferred mode of transport. Even that needs to be studied. I mean, I think trains are a sort of, has been a space of fascination for me. So yes.
Okay, thank you very much. We have some questions. Ping Yuangu, thank you, Professor Ishita. How do you think about the relationship or definitive differences between the space inside the, just a minute, inside the train and the space around the rail line and the space of station hall, such as station hall entrance? So would you like to take this question first?
Yes. I mean, really, thank you. It's a very, very important question for me because the first, sorry, I mean, I should have structured the presentation a bit better. The first phase of the fieldwork, what I plan to do is do fieldwork. I mean, really co-travel as a co-traveler within the trains. Then I want to identify certain junction stations, or let's where there is this perceived ideas that this is from where many workers have access to, and I want to conduct interviews there. UNESCO Internal Migrant Initiative actually talks about, there was a brilliant conversation that happened in Delhi a few years ago, where they had alerted to one of the magazine covers, and this is a city-based magazine, where they were constantly doing a photo shoot of the migrant workers who would come to Nizamuddin railway station. And every sort of an issue had a migrant worker and a migrant worker family. So the station hall entrance, particularly in our case, what we call the waiting areas or the waiting rooms. So stations have to inform an important part of this journey. Absolutely right. Also, I think modes of access to the station, the last mile that we call in the journey, in the infrastructure logistics literature, right? That last mile, I think, is something. And yes, spaces around the railway lines, I think a lot can be learned from the experience of the pandemic, where people were using actually this railway tracks as roadways, because there's an association it has it reduces the time and the distance.
Okay, thank you very much. And Valentino Grillo, thank you for the very interesting presentation and for presenting migration also through the idea of circulation, all the way through the railway and Indian trains as places of journey. For me, trains in India evoke a very strong imaginary link to colonial times and the attempt of the British to modernize, but also control the colonies. I wonder if you could expand on women's representation of train as means of migration. How is the gendered experience of migration, especially in relation to the available technologies in India?
Such a great set of questions. I feel motivated now. This is, like as far as trains are concerned, one thing one also has to be viewed gender in trains, and how trains as a mode of transportation system also made rooms for, let's put it this way, certain seats that are reserved for females in this particular trains. Every train has a sort of a provision for a certain number of quota, which they use a very interesting word, ladies quota, they still use that word officially for a number of seats in the trains. And of course, and this is where I think I got really interested in the history of, what sort of meaning making do migrant workers, because railways were built on the backs of a certain kind of workers and forced labor, bonded labor. We all know that. That is the history of railways in India as well. But when it comes to women's representation of train as both a means of migration, and also what kind of meaning making do women associate with trains, because what we find, and I think scholars on literary studies have done fantastic job where they have really looked at how the trains kind of represent both ideas of paternal home and their newly created home. I mean, mostly in marriage-related migration. So there is that sort of literature, but when it comes to ethnographic literature, right now I'm finding it difficult to recollect anything that I have read which talks about gendered experience of particularly representation of train as a means of migration. So there is a scope to do that sort of a work on women's representation of train as a means of migration. But you do find literature on middle class women's views of ladies' compartments. There are those exciting documentary films on middle class, working class women within Bombay, taking this ladies taking trains to go to their places of work. So there is that documentation. But this long distance trains, I can't think of. Gendered experience of migration, relation to available technologies in India. This is a very, very fantastic question, because this also takes us to the question of, how women are represented first, how women have, not only how do women use technologies, let's put it this way, because we do have in most, I can tell you from my own practical experience with the domestic workers, many of these domestic workers who wanted to be enrolled in the database, they really had to take access to let's put it this way, the cyber cafes, etc. So women's access to technologies remains sort of limited when it comes to representation of themselves in this data set. This is something, but I'm yet to explore that question, but thank you for that fantastic question.
Okay, thank you very much. We have another question. Let me just not to mix the order. Thank you for Nangsel. Thank you for the wonderful presentation, Professor Ishita Dey. As you mentioned in the presentation, you will be looking at a sleeper class compartment in trains. I'm curious to know, why would you prefer to choose sleeper compartments over the general compartments, which are more deprived? Second, why would you than the sleeper compartments? Do you think there will be a class difference between the travelers in these two compartments, and how would this affect the research, if at all? And the second, can you also share a little about the research methodology that you would be choosing to understand the migrant journeys?
Mostly my work would be of an ethnographic nature, and it would be an ethnography of train journeys. And I really, really appreciate your question about why am I not choosing the general compartments to the sleeper class compartment. I would also like to acknowledge my own positionality coming from a certain gender, certain class, certain caste. And this is where I would really, because let's put it this way, Bihar is not my home state, and where I'll be working for the first time. So one of the ways, I really thought about is to actually choose the sleeper compartments first in the first part of the study and see how it goes, compared to the general compartments where it will be more deprived in terms of facilities. Yes, I mean, like no sleeper berths are available, but in sleeper compartments, how do I put it? Just because, there are facility, I mean, just because there's a place where during the night time, it is expected or it is assumed that people will sleep, need not necessarily mean that, it will happen. So I do not want to go with that assumption. Also, I think with general compartments, because the space will be more intimate and private, it might be important to find, let's put it this way, for people to open up to me during that journey, and then maybe co-travel with a migrant family. I have really thought about this, maybe it would be in the second round, if I can travel in the general compartment with a family, I have identified or who has gone through that similar experiences, maybe then, one can co-travel. Okay. Let's put it this way, the sleeper class compartments can also be a bit, can also help me remain a bit anonymous, that first time experience can also be. There will be a class difference, maybe, may not be, because many a times, people also, like some of the migrant workers that I've spoken to, they might like some of the migrant workers I've spoken to or before, they have traveled both by general and sleeper. But yes, of course, this might affect my reading of class and caste. Let me put it this way, and I'm aware of that.
Yeah. Okay, thank you very much. We have, I think, some comments that I think they are addressing the similar kind of issue, and then I will also hang mine in relation to temporality, and I think all of them that address that. But Maria Guric, thank you, Professor Ishita, for an inspiring talk. Particularly, I found inspiring your linking of partition related, just a minute. This goes, yeah, partition related so-called internal migration and class-related differences in refugee journeys. It resonates much with my work on Kosovo Serb refugees' internal displacement in Serbia. My question is about home during, before, after journeys. You mentioned a socially stratified sense of home. May I ask you to elaborate a bit more on your understanding of home in the migration journeys? What is the role of temporality, spatiality? I will also bring then Shahram Khosravi's points and suggestions to that also, because it also addresses the question of temporality. Thank you, Professor Dey. With railways, a new temporality arrived to the cities. Timetable and synchronization of labor force. How do you think about the time aspect in your study? Two books came to my mind: On Time, Technology and Temporality in Modern Egypt by on Barak, and The Deportation Express, A History of America Through Forced Removal by Blue. This ethnography from a train station in Paris might also be of interest. Adventure Capital, Migration and the Making of an African Hub in Paris by Julia Kleinman. And I would like to also add to that in terms of the temporality question, because no matter how that in a way reconfigures the stratification or attempts to situate yourself in the social placemaking within that, but the train and those kind of also buses, but the train basically, it has an kind of an equalizer effect of in terms of temporality. And I know from the literature that there was certain groups of people who refused to be on the same time, same temporality by traveling on train. That we know from the historical studies. So how do you approach the kind of the questions, very important questions, I think, that posed in relation to temporality and then the spatiality? That Maria Gruitch and Shahram Khosravi also they address those questions.
Thank you. Of course, I mean, temporality will, play a sort of very important, central, I think, thematic in framing of the study. Because trains also, I think this is a literature, particularly the colonial rail, the introduction of railways in the colonies kind of represent a certain temporality and also spatiality in terms of core periphery relations. That idea of temporality, I think, also kind of arrived, and you're absolutely right, Professor Khosravi, because in the Delhi master plan, it was actually said that if we can, trains are always seen as a logistical problem to keep people also away, right? In the making of the cities, if we can connect the workplace to the place of homes, we can also keep people away. It's also a way of addressing the housing problem, right? I mean, and Delhi master plan clearly was talking about that, if we have to ensure proper networks, this thing, so that, the cities don't get crowded, right? So, and I think, timetable and synchronization of labor force is something I think scholars on Bombay should really, really study, but how do I think about the time aspect of the study? And this is where some of my friends who have worked at the policy level, they have really, really told me to also follow the seasonal labor migration routes, right? And I think the seasonal labor migration routes kind of may give me a window to talk about, to look at timetable and synchronization of labor force, because during a certain seasons, particularly certain agricultural seasons, in certain routes, there will be a change of the labor force. So timetable and synchronization of labor force has to figure in the framing of the study. And thank you for the suggestion of the books. My understanding of home in migration journeys is also, and I don't know if I'm speculating here a little bit, because but let me go ahead and say it. I also feel there has to be a way in, and this is where, because many of the migrant workers, they also one cannot only study the trains, only as transportation networks, right? And the trains also become part home, part private. It's that in-betweenness of the home. And what bit of the home or their imagination of the home do they carry both backward and forward in the trains. So this first part of the fieldwork, I want to kind of follow that linear fashion, source to destination, but I actually want to go backward as well, from say from Mumbai to Bhagalpur, and Mumbai, from Goa to Patna, which would also be another kind of, this thing, but not, and this is where I think the homes actually could be both in the source and in the destination states. And this is where I think gendered nature of migration, or scholarship around gendered nature of migration, clearly says many of the women, female migrants, particularly who has come to the cities as caregivers or as domestic workers, they say we have made our homes here. And they're not saying it because it is their marital home, but these are the homes that they have created of their own choices, whatever those negotiated choices are.
Thank you very much, Ishita. I think there is yes, that is both Nangsel and Shahram Khosravi are thanking you, and then I'm looking forward to your work. I mean, I think we are all looking forward to this very rich and very interesting way of an entering to several kinds of the problematics that we deal with. So we are all looking forward. If I do not see any other questions, other thanks, and these thank you very much. I have one last issue, that is, if I may, that is, I think we have like 5 more minutes. I am in every aspect of it with this project. I find it very interesting and very convincing to I found it, looking at the trains, it is all the modernity, how it comes into the picture, how colonialism, and in terms of keeping labor and then the place of work, how it figures in the labor history, also very interesting. But I'm just wondering why, why to call this as a kind of or situate this within a rural-urban continuum, because you said that you want to look at it as the rural-urban continuum and as an in-between space. And it is in-between spaces usually also bring this kind of a transitory kind of stuff, but it is, I think you are aiming something more than that. But why should we think this as within the continuum of rural urban? Because we have, I mean, we know that it's not necessarily rural urban and urban and this kind of a continuum idea, wouldn't that bring back this kind of the linearity that your project very nicely situates itself against, which is, I think, very valuable. So why do you want to keep this kind of in-between spaces are also that there is something which is not in between, that so I would like to hear a little bit more on that, if you would like to.
No. I think it is important. I mean, when I was even when I was, every time I was writing this line, I was questioning myself that the project wants to kind of challenge the linearity, as you put it. I was not able to find that framing. But I want to, because I want to kind of look at trains as this sort of an in-between space in journeys of arrival and in journeys of, arrival, this thing. So I was thinking, because the existing literature kind of talks only about the rural and urban, right? I'm particularly thinking, can the trains be used, or the study on migrant journeys in trains, can it be used also to kind of uh, to find something newer aspect about the rural urban continuum, not only about the lived experiences of the migrants from the rural, how, because that is a sort of a literature that we have, right? The continuity in the urban spaces, or how the urban spaces have transformed the the idea of the rural. And the literature on globalization has a lot to contribute in that rural urban continuum. But to push my argument a little further, why I kept the rural urban space continuum is also to kind of talk about, because migration cannot be delinked from the, and going back to a very, very classic essay, I think, by Manuel Castells, that study of sociology of migration cannot be delinked from the social transformation. And I think given that, the way urbanization in India is being carried about, where every sort of what used to be a town before is now being projected as a smart city, or there is a tier 1, tier 2, this sort of a stratification of cities that is going on. And stratification I'm just using is very loosely here. The way in which the stratification of cities is going on, I was also thinking if rural urban continuum could be used to kind of revisit these categories through train networks, but I take your comment, that maybe I need a better framing, to think of this in-between space.
Okay, thank you. Thank you very much, because I think that is because of the linearity, because of our assumptions, the several cities that come in between are erased, that it is like the country of origin and country of arrival. Before that, the person had been mobile, displaced X times, but that does not, within the country itself, might not count, because we are always thinking that the country of origin and country of settlement, then this kind of the in-between, or the kind of in the journey, several different kind of stations, that it might be different cities, it might be different areas, it might be different countries, get really erased. That's why I was bringing it. And I know that you are not doing it and you do not want to do it, but thanks a lot, Ishita, for this wonderful and very inspiring talk. And thank you very much for your questions, for your comments, and for your participation. So we are all looking forward to reading about your work, on your work further. And this is our last seminar series for 2022. So I wish all of you a pleasant and relaxing holiday season. And we will be back in January again with our seminar series. Thank you very much again, Ishita.
Thank you. Thank you. Really, really thank you.
Okay, bye.